Hey, John. I know that recently you did some work with clients around communicating more than just their wills, but really about how they reflected on their life and what they wanted their legacy to be. And these are called legacy letters. Today on Friends Talk Financial Planning, we're going to talk about legacy letters and why you should really consider them and what you should include. I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel. I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm John Shear. I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin. And before we start talking about how to leave behind your legacy, I want to remind everybody to hit that subscribe button. It helps other people find our information on YouTube and help spread the good works that we're doing here. So with that, let's jump in. I'm happy to share about what our experience was. And one of the cool things I think, Bridget, about this, and you mentioned in the introduction, is what comprehensive financial planning, right? We look at all aspects of a client's life and its financial life, not just investment sort of things. So not all aspects, but, a wide range of things. And estate planning is one of those, right? And we're not attorneys, neither is anybody in your office. We won't write wills and do things, but we help talk to people about, what do you want your legacy to be? And so often it's about the money side and how do we manage the taxes and who gets what and those sort of things, which are all super important, right? But then the idea of these sort of like, what is it that you want to leave behind? And it's not the money necessarily for almost everyone, right? It's some of these other, I don't know, spiritual is the right word for it, but some of these other deeper meaning things, these values. And that's what this is all about, right?
Yeah, well, I find it so interesting because, like you said, money, it's not just about money. Like money is not just about the dollars. It's also about what it represents. And the
Yeah.
same with if you're reviewing your life, it's not just about how much did I make, but it's also about like, well, what were my values? What was my motivation? What am I proud of and what do I regret? So why don't you get into the process and talk about like how you got people thinking about this?
Yeah. So I'll just give you some of the background on it. As I was listening to a podcast, and there was a gentleman named Blake Brewer, and we can put a link to his website in the show notes here. But he was talking about how he sort of invented. He calls it the Legacy Letter Challenge. And what happened with him, and he's got a great video on his website, but in Reader's Digest version, he was a young adult and his family took a vacation out to Hawaii. He went snorkeling with his dad, and his dad ended up getting caught in an undercurrent and dying on this trip. Right, so I mean, shocking, terrible thing. And back in the condo after trying to process all this stuff, his mom had found in his dad's luggage a letter he had written to Blake, and it basically was a legacy letter without knowing it at the time. It said, hey, here are things that are really important to me, and you're special to me, and here's what I'm proud about, and here's what I hope for your future, like those sorts of things, just sort of a reflection. And for Blake, it was, again, like literally the last words from his dad. And so he's taken that and made it a mission in his life. His goal is to have a million parents write a legacy letter to their kids. And so I heard this, and he's promoting this. I thought, man, that sounds like these things you and I are talking about, right? It's not about the money. It's about all the stuff. Like what's really important is, like having more money for, 99% of people is not the goal, but it's experiences and family and all these things. I said, I'd like to, how do I do that and help my clients with that? And so he puts on a little a webinar and a presentation, and he's got a structure for helping walk through how do you do this? Because it sounds like everybody you talk to says, oh, it sounds awesome. Well, how do you do that? You go like, I don't know. You write stuff, like what do you say and how do you say it and what do you do? And he's been through it on the receiving end and he's done it on the delivering end, and he's helped a lot of people do this. So he's got some metrics and practices for how to go through that and how to think about it. And I'd be happy to share sort of the framework and things if it's of interest. But I want to say the one thing that was really one of the big takeaways for me was that it's never going to be perfect, right? That's where I get stuck. I want to say exactly like it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be complete, but getting it done is way more important than what gets done. And so for as viewers hear this and think, oh man, that'd be a really cool thing to do, is if you can do something doesn't matter, where it is. It's like, that's really powerful, and be happy to share some experiences and that sort of thing if it's of interest.
Yeah. So let's talk about it's just really interesting. So let's talk about the basic structure. So I don't mind writing things. So if I'm going to write this, I say, okay, here's my legacy letter. That's sentence one.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So
Go ahead.
yeah, so there's the framework that he puts together, which I thought was really useful, is have an introduction, like why you're writing this thing, like what's the motivation, right?
Right.
So that's, here's why I'm writing this letter to you. And then he suggests starting with an apology or expressing any regrets you have,
Mhm.
right? And it sounds kind of weird, I think, when you hear it at first, but then you think, wait a minute, depending on relationships or feelings or different things, you kind of go, let's get all the bad stuff out of the way and go, whether it's I wish I would spend more time for me as a father with the kids, or geez, I'm sorry I couldn't do this, or anything that you might feel is hanging out there. It kind of clears the slate for the person being able to maybe receive that. Again, depends on the relationship that you might have with and again, we're talking about this. I'm focusing on kids. I've written them for my kids, but I just want to bring up here too, Bridget, that when I was first listening to this, I shared this with my wife. I said, "Hey, I think I want to do this for clients." And her first thing was that she said was, "This shouldn't be just for clients. Or for kids. This should be for spouses." And I thought, "Oh, what a cool way that is." And Blake, I know, is actually working on a segment of that, because it's not just about parents and kids are an easy relationship to focus on, but there's other relationships that are really meaningful in people's lives where this can be useful.
Mhm.
So
So,
introduction. Oh yeah, go ahead.
okay, so the apologies, here's what I would have to say about that is that if you're getting stuck, move on.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Sometimes people don't want to think about all the whatever they might have to apologize for.
Yeah,
And so if that's a sticking point, just stop. And the other thing I would say about apologies is say, don't try to explain it. Just, I'm sorry for blah, whatever it is.
right,
And don't
right.
say, but here are my motivations, all that kind of,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and simple.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
just
we're,
blah, whatever, period.
and of course everybody's is unique, but it's interesting hearing him talk about that. 1 or 2 pages that's ideal, right?
Right.
Not a 10-page diary on things, right? Like just some basic stuff. So you get in, right? If there's anything that you need to get cleaned off the plate, go ahead and do that. And then sort of the conversation is, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I believe in you. Like those things, and from his experience, hearing it from his dad, and as you think about it, going to the kids, like those things are important for them to hear, and hopefully they know that, right? That whatever age the kids are, but to have it expressed in writing is really important. um,
Yeah.
so
Well, and especially because the grieving process is so mysterious, and you never know what you're gonna like. It just seems like it might help you with that process.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Probably won't hurt.
What was that?
It probably won't hurt.
Right,
So
right.
it's like a low risk proposition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I love you, I believe in you, I'm proud of you. Share some memories to the extent that it's useful, some things you want to leave behind, and then any life advice that you might have. So that's sort of the framework for these
Oh,
things
life
is,
advice is interesting too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Of course,
Yeah.
everybody's, as you described, everybody's is different, right? Some people don't address all of it, but that's again, getting something down is really the important part.
Right, right, exactly. So you were saying that when we talked before the show that you had like some of your clients had ingenious ways of like actually giving them to people.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that was interesting in this is this is not designed necessarily as something to put with your will and leave behind so that when you're gone, your kids read it. This
Mhm.
is like share it with them on a current basis. And we had somebody that said, "Well, yeah, I thought this is such a cool idea," and she put it in her adult who was visiting her kid's house and put it in the Christmas tree, and thinking she'd find it, and the daughter never saw it until she was taking down the Christmas tree, and then had this sort of follow up after Christmas of this letter, of this meaningful thing from her mom. So
Mhm.
some pretty interesting things from that standpoint.
Right.
And I was
but that reminds the thing that I found that interesting about that is you don't have to set it up so you're there while they're reading it.
right,
That
right.
would that might make it awkward. I don't know. My social skills are pretty low, but that might make me feel awkward.
Yeah,
But then
yeah.
they have to respond a certain way.
I shared this idea with a friend of mine. I said, "Hey, if you want to come to the presentation, please do." And he said, and he doesn't have children. He says, "No, my partner and I, we tell each other these things, and I don't, it's a cool idea, but I don't think it applies." And I said to him, I said, the one thing about it is, even if, and hopefully you do, a lot of times people, especially dads, have a hard time communicating these things, right? I mean, it's just so to be able to say that stuff, make sure your kids know it's super important. But then, as I said to my friend, I said, think about when your spouse is gone, and if you have in their words, right, like literally, not my memory of what they said, but in their words, this tangible thing
Right.
that's left behind, right? I mean, I think it's a really powerful thing. And if you've lost parents, I've lost parents, and you think about some of those, I don't know, whatever is the letters, maybe now these days you have videos, but some of those tangible memories that are intentional, I think there's something really powerful about that. And again, kind of circling back, yep, let's make sure we take care of the wills and have all the powers of attorney in place. And where does the money go in the taxes? But when you think about what you're leaving behind, to leave behind something like this legacy letter for people and to have people know it while you're still alive too, I mean, really powerful thing, I think.
Well, here's another tip I would say is that if you are doing this with somebody and you're intending to leave it with your will, it might be nice to say, I don't want you crying over me for the rest of like,
Well,
like
unless you want that, maybe that's part of
right. Like so to try to help them. Uh
Yeah,
say, you've got a great future. Like you said, you believe in them.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So great. It seems like this is a great way to wrap it up. Hi, I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel. I've got a family financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm John Shear. I've got a family financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin. Both Bridget and I are taking on new clients. We'd love to hear from you, but we're also both members of the Alliance of Comprehensive Planners, which is a nationwide group of planners that think similar to how we do. So if you like what you hear on our show and like to find an advisor in your local area, check out acplanners.org.
And please subscribe.